Good morning. My name is Kyle Houchins, and we have an exciting day today. If you missed my note, V7 is shipping. If you weren't aware of that, it is. If you go to Rhino3D.com buy, we did a soft release November 9th, which meant it went out, but we didn't say anything about it because we're trying to make sure that it's all stable in our dealer network and our pipeline and all that kind of stuff is up and rolling. But if you go to Rhino3D.com/buy right now, and buy Rhino, you will get V7. The exciting thing about V7 is the number one feature in V7 is SubD. And we're going to be talking about that today, which is really cool. So what we're going to do, so I'm going to mute my other computer so you don't have to listen to it ding, is we're going to build a little chair. And I went back and forth because I actually did a chair yesterday for the Windows side. Actually, maybe I'll ask you guys. I got two models I can build today. I can build a chair. I can build this thing. And let's see. I can build this one. Or we can build a swim fin that's also a kind of an interesting SubD build. I'll let you guys hit the chat and decide. You want to see a chair or a swim fin today? They're both fun models, but different. Chair. All right. Damien has spoken. We're doing a chair. Okay, everybody says chair. All right, so we'll do the chair. So what we're going to talk about today is basically the how to get your hands wrapped around the new SubD stuff. Okay, so so this chair, what I usually do, like, okay, let me back up a second. I'm all excited with V7s here. Sorry, let me get my act together here. So with V7, right, we've got a bunch of new tools out. We've got some rendering stuff. We've got some new modeling stuff. We've got some pipeline things in the background. We've got some new Grasshopper components. We've got all that kind of stuff. We're not going to talk about Grasshopper today, by the way, so don't get excited. The biggest thing that I've been involved in, and if you know anything about my background, I used to be the tech and the trainer for T-splines years ago, so I have kind of a background in SubDs, and which is one of the reasons that I'm here. And so what I want to talk about is, now you've got these new tools, right? What do you do with them? How do you use them? And how do we avoid you've got a new hammer and now everything looks like a nail, right? So I want to talk a little bit about, when do you use SubD? How do you use SubD? How does it fit into your current tool set? And how do you integrate it intelligently so that everything doesn't look like a giant pile of soft taffy mush, right? I don't know if you remember, I don't know if any of you are old enough, I know Damien is, to remember back when Photoshop first came out and everybody first started drawing in Photoshop on a Wacom tablet before they had Cintiqs. And everybody's sketches, everybody was doing Photoshop sketches with a brush that was too big and too soft, and everything looked squishy and spray painted and stuff like that. And it took some learning on all of us who were back in that era to return the sharpness to the sketches and to get that kind of pencil-like quality. And people are looking at my sketches going, yeah, you're still working on that. Yep, it's true. So, but the key here is to intelligently use SubD, not T-splines, to use SubD where it makes sense and where it can speed up your workflow and increase your productivity, as opposed to trying to force it into something that doesn't make sense. And so when we look at this chair, there's a bunch of different pieces here, right? We've got the chair itself, which is very soft and very smooth and has compound curvature in every direction. And so this is a really good application of SubD, right? We've got kind of a machined little handle down here for the uppy downy bits if you want to raise or lower the chair. And chances are that's probably a decent object to build in Nurbs, right? The wheels, we want them to be perfectly round. So that is a good candidate for Nurbs. The little casters down here, Probably we could go either way. I did them in SubD yesterday and it worked out really well, so we'll probably do the same thing here as well. And then the curious part here is this base, right? And you've all seen these office chairs that have these cast bases, and there's this really smooth transition here. There's a really smooth transition between each one of the legs, and nice roundy over bits here, and all sorts of stuff like that, right? And so we could build this out of Nurbs, but it would take a long time and we'd have to do lots of filleting and blending and continuity checks and all that kind of stuff. So actually this thing is actually a very good candidate for SubD. And so that's probably how we're gonna proceed today. So the first thing I do, and let me back up just from the very beginning, the way I start all of these videos, and actually let me back up one step further and just say, if you haven't seen one of these getting started videos before, they're intended to be interactive, right? That's why we do them live. So by all means, please hit the chat. If you don't find the chat yet, find it now. If you see stuff that you don't understand, or you see something that I did that was too fast, or I didn't explain it thoroughly enough or something like that, hit the chat. Don't worry about interrupting. We do these sessions for you, so don't worry about hurting my feelings or getting in the way. If I need to split off and do a little segue and talk about something different, we'll talk about something different for a second, and then we'll get back on it. Pretty good at maintaining about 7 different streams of thought. So by all means, please jump in, ask questions if you have along the way, and I'll do my best to keep an eye on the chat and answer them. So the way I start almost every build is with the picture command, and I usually do this a sketch either the day before or the day of, and so and that's usually pretty clear how it was done by the quality of the sketch. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this into the modeling space, and I'm going to just kind of nail it down. And if I knew how big this thing needed to be, I could scale it simply by drawing a line. And let's say this is like 10 units. Actually, that's pretty small. Let's do, I don't even know whether I'm in inches or millimeters because this is a demo, but I would know that if I was going to do this for real. So let's say this thing is 40 units wide, right? So I just draw myself a little hockey stick out here in space, and then I grab this and I scale it using my O snaps from one end to the other, and then I can say, okay, that's about 40 units. Now, because this drawing is not in orthographic space, it's kind of got some perspective on it. You can see that the bottom's tipped and the top has some perspective on it. So it provides some challenges when we're going to model it. We're going to actually have to do a little bit of interpolation along the way. But what we can do as far as scaling things is, if we know, for instance, how wide this tube is, we can scale to the tube. If we know the diameter of the wheel, we can scale to the wheel, and that way we can get our sketch, in about the right neighborhood of size. So let's go ahead and make this a little bit more modeling friendly. And I'm going to come down here to the materials panel down here. And I'm going to scroll down to where it says object transparency. And I'm just going to drop the transparency. Actually, I'm going to raise the transparency on this a little bit to fade the image out. And then I'm going to just nail this down kind of somewhere over the origin, kind of somewhere in there, right? And I want to be just centrally located. And then I'm going to go to the perspective view, and I always slide these images out of the model space. And everybody asks me why I do that. And the reason that I do that is because I can't stand when something looks like this. And especially in shaded mode, this is particularly annoying to try and model in shaded mode when your sketch is in the center of your model. So if I just take it and I tuck it back here in space, I can see it and I can see my references, and if I go to the front view, it's still lined up the way I want it to be lined up. So that's why I do that. And then if I had extra views, I would take those and I would just copy those, and I would move them around into the different locations of where I wanted them to be. And then I go back to my layer stack. Let's make this layer called sketch, and then let's right click and change object layer to move this image onto the sketch layer. And then the reason that I like to do that is because I can lock these. I can also hide them or unhide them as necessary. And if I had more than one view, if I had a front, top, right, bottom, side, whatever, I would put each one on a different layer. Spell it right. Yeah, I went to art school, but not that much art school. I can actually spell a little bit. So we've got this set up. We've got this so we can turn it on and off. We've got it faded so that we can see. So let's start talking about what we want to do here. And we've kind of identified that we're going to do the chair out of SubD. We've kind of identified that we're going to do the base out of SubD. This little adjuster bit here, we may do a little of both. The wheels, we may do a little of both, and go from there. So let's kind of go for the biggest bang for the buck here, which is the seat itself. And I'm going to go to the SubD tab over here. If you don't have tabs like this, by the way, if you go to the preferences and you go to themes, I'm running in the default. Oh, they changed it. It used to be Mac and Windows. Now it's minimal and default. So this is actually the default now. Never mind. So you probably have this if you load it in V7. In V6, this used to have a Windows or a Mac theme, and this was called the Windows theme that had the tab on it. But looks like they updated that correctly for V7 finally. So so everybody's working in the same model space. All right. So we go to the SubD tab. I'm just going to grab a box here, and then in my XYZ count, I'm going to change this to 4, tab, and then 4, and then 4. Come now. Make that 4, 4, 4, and I'm going to do it from the center, and I'm just going to nail it down. Actually, I'm going to nail that down at the origin, and I did not do that, so let's do this. 4, 4, 4, and then I'm going to do it center, and I'm going to do that, nailing it down at the origin. I'm going to shift drag to bring it out as a cube, and I'm either going to pick the outside of this to aim for or the inside of this. I either have to make the seat bottom and then flare the arms out, or I have to make the arms and then taper the seat bottom out. So I'm probably going to just aim for the seat bottom. So I'm going to do something like that, and then I'm going to just use enter for the same height. I'm going to use gumball to move it up, place it there, and then I'm going to go to wireframe so I can see what I'm doing. All right. So I've got my SubD placed, and I can see right off the bat that this thing is a cube, right? And my chair is not a cube. So let's fix that. And the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to just hold down Shift Command, and I'm going to click some faces, double clicking in between. And then I'm going to just delete. And that's going to open the top. I'm going to Shift Command, click a couple of faces, double click in between. See how it fills those in? Delete that. So now I've just got the basic form of my chair, right? Go to the front view. I'm going to go back to wireframe. And I can see that I probably have one too many rows here. So I'm just going to Shift Command drag and delete it. Oops, got one too many. There we go. I'm going to delete that edge. And that gives me the basic layout of what I'm trying to do here, right? So I'm going to focus on just modeling on one side of this. And to do this, I'm going to switch to box mode by hitting the tab key. And you can see that the SubD switches to a polygonal or a control cage view. And that's one of the cool things about SubDs is they exist in kind of two spaces, right? This is the control cage or the polygon model, and this is the interpolated SubD or the smooth model. So we refer to this as box mode, and we refer to this as smooth mode. Now, how many of you have experience with SubDs? Has anybody seen SubDs, modeled in SubDs, know what a SubD is, or is this all new for everybody? Because if it's all new, I'm going to segue out for a second and just do a little demo on how we control the shape of a SubD. All new, all new, all new. Okay. I would expect it would be new for most people. So So let's talk about this a little bit. And I'm going to scoot this off to the side for now, and I'm just going to make a new one so that we can play with it without screwing up the old one. And if I turn this on, right, if I go over here and I turn my points on, go to my standard and turn my points on, you can see that when I switch from smooth to SubD, notice what happens. The points don't move, right? So there's a couple of pieces of a SubD. There is a control vertice, which is here, right? And the control vertice does not move. It stays in the same place no matter whether you're in box mode or smooth mode, okay? There are faces. If I shift control click, this is a face, right? And we can pull that and move it, and you notice everything attached to it kind of moves with it. There is an edge, and I can pick these edges, and I can move these around like this, right? And then there's what's called a vertex, which is a surface point of a SubD. Now, the interesting thing about a surface point is if I switch from box mode to smooth mode, look what happens. See where the gumball is? That's the smooth point location. That's the box mode location. So a vertex and a CV are different. So we've got a vertex, which is a surface point. We've got a control vertice, which doesn't move, and that's the same space in either box mode or smooth mode. We've got edges and we've got faces, okay? And then we've got obviously the whole object. So the interesting thing about the way these things are structured is it's really familiar. Even if you've never seen it before, it's pretty familiar. So if you look at this, I've got a control vertice here, 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 and here. And if we think about this as rule of three, right? Nurbs modeling rule of three, which is it takes 3 points to make a corner. 1, 2, 3, right? And if I turn the points on for this thing, you'll see a familiar structure here. You'll see 1, 1, 2, 3, and then here, right? So if I take this control vertice and I move it closer, you'll see that the edge of this thing, or the corner on this thing, sharpens up. That's a familiar scenario because we do the same thing on a Nurbs curve. So as I move these closer, they get sharper corners. As I move it farther apart, I get softer corners. And the thing that I want you to understand is that, let me get all of them, is that SubDs do this in 3 dimensions. So you've not only got, you know, this direction, for lack of a better term, let's call this the U direction. You have it in the V direction as well, which is this way. So where this shape comes from, right? This shape comes from is these 3 points, these 3 points, and these 3 points. So these points right here in this corner work together to make that shape. And so depending on what I do with those guys, if I scale those points together, that point is going to get this detail is going to get very sharp. If I scale them apart or move them apart, that's going to get much softer. And so the way that we can control this is if I want to say, for instance, I want to tighten up this corner, I can grab this edge and I can slide it up and look what happens. Okay, that's the exact same thing that would happen here if I took this point. The exact same thing that happens here if I took this point and did it right and moved it up there. Okay, so you already know a lot about SubDs because you already know a lot about curves. Now, the one thing that I want to reemphasize about SubDs is lightness is key. So the lighter you can keep these things, the smoother and nicer and more controllable they're going to be. So the same rule applies if you're doing a Nurbs corner. We don't ever do a Nurbs corner like this, right? That would be a terrible curve. We can all agree on that, right? Now, I get a really nice sharp corner here, but this is a mess. I would never do it that way. If I needed a sharp corner, I would simply just do it with 3 points, but I would do it with 3 points that are very close together. Right? I can get a very sharp corner out of that. In fact, I can get them even closer as long as they don't cross. And I can get a very tight detail out of that depending on what I want to do. Now, let's extrapolate rule of 3 one more time and think about this in a little bit more esoteric terms. So if I had a shape that goes like this, right? I'm still doing rule of 3. I'm just stealing a point from one part to the other. So let's do some counting. I've got 1, 2, 3, which makes up this corner. I've got 1, 2, 3, which makes up this corner. I've got 1, 2, 3 that makes up that corner, and so on and so forth. Okay. If we looked at that on a SubD, each one of those points would be an edge. So if we wanted to make a SubD that had this structure, you would put an edge everywhere there's a point in order to make this happen. Okay, so that's the basic, the basic structure of how a SubD is put together. Think about it in the same terms that you would as far as manipulating a curve. So let's go to our chair and look at this and say what we want to do. Now, because this is a symmetrical object, I'm going to kind of maintain my center line. I'm not going to worry about this stuff over here. I'm just going to model on one side and then we'll reflect it over at a later point. So let's grab this edge right here. Let's relocate the gumball to here, and I'm just using my O snaps to put it there. And then we're just going to take this and we're just going to bend it out like that. And then I'm going to shift command drag these edges, and I'm going to just pull these over. And then I'm going to shift command drag these edges, and I'm going to pull these over. And you can see how we can very quickly lay our SubD right on our art. We can shift command drag and just get it right on there. It's just like dragging taffy, right? And I may even have one edge more than I need, because this edge kind of pretty evenly defines like kind of where the back of this would be. So let's shift command drag and just get rid of this top row. Then I'm going to grab these two edges and I'm going to pull those up, and that's going to make my back. And then I have to look at this and say, okay, that's kind of my back, and that does what I need it to do, but it's not quite the right shape. So I have to say, well, do I pull this down? But I'm not really getting the shape that I want, right? So let's add an edge. Let's just take this and double click, come over here to SubD, and we're just going to add an edge into the model. I'm just going to stick it kind of right there. Now this gives me some extra detail, which I can simply just come down here, and actually I'm going to do this in box mode. I'm going to switch to box mode because it's easier to place this stuff. And we're going to think about our corners. What do we have here? We've got a corner here, right? So we need 1, 2, 3 points, right? That's our corner. We don't need 8. We don't need 16. We don't need 74. So if you've got 74 edges between here and there and you only need 3, get rid of the other 71 edges. Just double click them and delete them. So I've got my corner here, and then I've also got a corner here, right? 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to steal this one. I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to come out here. So I've got all the detail I need in order to make my shape. And if I go to smooth mode again, then I can use a little bit of refining and just come in here and adjust my final shape. So what I want you to think about is box mode is where you do the bulk of your heavy lifting, right? And then smooth mode is where you kind of come in and just do a little bit of refinement here and there. And the reason for that, the reason that I want you to do it that way is because it's very, very easy to torture your mesh in smooth mode. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So if I come in here and I say, okay, I want this edge to be, or I want a detail here, right? So I'm going to pull this point, and I want this to be a really sharp little detail like that. And that's cool, right? I like that a lot. And then I want to take this and I want to move it. I want to get this like really like laser beam sharp like that. And that's cool until I go to my mesh and I see that I've done this. Okay. This in a box mode mesh is the equivalent of making a Nurbs curve that looks like this. Okay, we don't want that. So in order to do this, in order to get this detail, and to be fair, in quick and dirty words, or in quick and dirty terms, you could actually do this. This actually would convert to Nurbs and actually would be okay. It's just bad model practice, right? It's like single span surfacing in Nurbs is fantastic. You don't always get it. You know, we don't always practice that. But so if you just have to bang something out, go for it. But what I want to do is I want to encourage you to keep an eye on your box mode and try not to have this kind of stuff happen. If you need a detail like that, add some more edges in that area so that you can get that detail cleanly without really torturing your mesh. Okay, so I'm not going to worry too much about that right now, fixing this over here, because like I said, we're just going to flip this over with the reflect command. So we can do a little bit of more sculpting to this thing. Let's add a couple of, let's raise this up a little bit just to add a little bit of, you know, under thigh support. And then I don't necessarily know if I even need this edge. I don't think I need it, so I'm going to pull it out. And then I can use this edge to determine how soft this transition is in the back. If I pull it forward, it gets softer. If I bring it back, it gets sharper, right? So I'm going to pull it forward because I want that to really be soft back there. And then I'm going to use this edge actually to push it out because I want just a little bit of curvature on the sides. I'm going to move this one a little bit. So I'm doing small moves in smooth mode, and then I'm switching to box mode and just double checking that I haven't done anything crazy. Now you'll see that this edge right here, see how this edge jogs over and comes down? That will actually have an effect on how the light falls on the surface. And so the reason I keep harping on I want you to use box mode is we may want to come in here and just move this stuff around a little bit just to increase the flow, to make it a little bit more flowy and a little less jaggedy. And the longer you do this stuff as a SubD modeler, the more you'll kind of get in the groove of looking at your box mode and being able to kind of read it. See how this stuff up here, this edge line flows in a shape like that, but then this one's dead straight. We may not want that. I may want to actually kind of visually interpolate between that one and the straight line. And what that's going to do is that's going to allow the surface to kind of fall off really nicely, and then the highlights and everything are going to track correctly as I'm looking at it, right? So that's kind of what we're going for. So as you're looking at this and you're reading your box mode, you kind of want to keep an eye on anything that looks like this, unless that's the shape you're going for. Okay, so let's go back to perspective mode and then flip over here and take a look. So now we've got, see how our highlights are tracking really nicely through there? So let's say we're happy with that. So let's go back to box mode, go to the front view, and then let's just reflect this. And I'm going to use the center line here. I'm going to do a vertex snap and then just drag, and then I'm going to pick this is the side I want to keep, and it just flips over. Now, one thing you'll notice about reflect is it's got a light side and a dark side. This is the touch side over here. This is the no touch side. If I try to do something over here, it won't let me because that's the reflected side. If I move something over here though, let's say I grab this edge and I move it over here, it lets me iterate and see what I want to do so I can visually compare what's going on the left and the right. And then when I let go, it updates. And that allows you to be able to kind of visually iterate and see what's going on and get the thing the way you want it. Let's make one more modification here. I'm going to grab this, go to the front view, right view, and let's rotate this stuff. From here, and let's just add a little angle to the back. And it looks like I might have missed an edge there, so no, did it. So we've added a little angle to the back there, and then we'll take a look at it and decide kind of how this looks in comparison to our art. So I might make a few more little adjustments here. Shift Command click that edge and pull it up just a little bit. You can see how the reflect pauses for a second and then updates so I can compare it from one side to the other. And then let's make a few more little adjustments in here. And then we'll go to wireframe and just see where we're at. And because this sketch was done in perspective, we have a judgment call to make here, right? Do we say that this arm and everything is okay? Are we trying to match this inside line down here? Are we trying to match the outside line? I think we probably need to kind of split the difference. So I'm going to grab all of this and I'm just going to pull it over and I'm going to kind of stick it somewhere in the middle. I think that's going to get me where I need to be, and then I have to just readjust this. SubD modeling is a little fiddly. And as you get better at it and the more advanced we get at it, I'm going to show you some more tricks along the way, but I don't want to feed you with a fire hose right this second. So we're going to just talk about just basic pick and move and pick and move and pick and move, right? We're just typing with 2 fingers right now, and we'll do touch typing later as we get going forward. All right, so let's go to shaded mode again, and we're pretty much done with the chair. We just need to add the thickness and stuff like that. So I'm going to kill the reflection because I think we're in pretty good shape right now. I can always add it later. I'm just going to right click here and get rid of the reflection. And then I'm going to Shift Command double click an edge, and this is fun. I'm going to start dragging on a scale handle. I'm going to hold down Shift, and then I'm going to hold down Command. And what it's going to do is it's going to extrude an edge all the way around here as it scales. And that's going to give us our flange around this thing. All right, and if I hit smooth mode, you can see that we've got most of what we need for our chair right now. Now, we need to add a little bit of thickness to it, so let's go up here and we're just going to go to SubD, offset SubD, and I'm going to just have to experiment with the units because I have no idea what size this thing is. But so let's take a look at it. And that's a little thick at 1 unit, so I'm going to undo it and just redo it. And let's say we'll do a 1/2 unit. That gives us a nice thickness. Now you can see because this was an open SubD to start with, it creased these edges. See how they're very sharp like that? I don't necessarily want that, so I'm going to Shift Command double click. Okay, so what happened here when I did the offset, let me back up. When I did the offset, I did not delete the input, so I had 2 SubDs stacked on top of each other. So let's do that again. Let's delete the input. Let's do it again. There we go. Now if I Shift Command click, double click this, I get this entire edge. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to remove the crease. And you can see that it just softens that right up. See that? Now we still have a very sharp edge down here, and I don't want a sharp edge down here. So if I remove this crease, I want a little bit of an edge, but I don't want a super sharp edge. If I remove the crease, it goes too soft, right? I don't want that. That's too soft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this crease for right now. Let's go to box mode, double click, and I'm going to apply a bevel onto this. And the bevel lives right here. And I'm just going to drag a couple of more edges in there, and I only want 1 segment. Actually, I want 2 segments. There we go. And this gives me my 3, right? Look at that. I've got 1, 2, 3 edges. So this is going to be either a sharp or a tight corner, depending on how far or how close those 3 edges are. So I'm going to drop it somewhere in there. And then I'm going to Shift Command double click, and I'm going to remove the crease because I don't need it anymore on both those edges. When I go back to smooth mode, see what I get? I get a sharper edge, but not super, super sharp. And that's kind of what I wanted. So that's how you can control this so that you don't get that 1992 era fuzzy Photoshop sketch, right? This is how we add a little bit of sharpness to things. I can also Shift Command double click this edge and I can slide it. And I can slide it. This works better in box mode, by the way. So let's do it in box mode. And I can slide it. There we go. Oops, going the wrong direction. Looks like it's looking for its input down here. So let's go where it wants us to input it. And I can slide this edge closer or farther away. So if I bring it in tighter like that, and then I do the same thing here, I can bring these very close together without crossing. I don't want to cross them. And then I can see that edge tightens up. So the cool thing about this is you end up getting stuff that looks kind of production ready, super, super easy. Now, if you've ever tried to model a form like this, you know how difficult it is to get something that's super smooth. So let's just see how we did by go to Emap. And you can see that we have some really nice continuity here. In fact, if we do a let's do Space Needle is always a good one. You can see that we end up with really high quality surfaces. Okay. If you've ever tried to do something like, you know, continually curvature like that in Nurbs, you'll know how difficult that is. So we've got our chair pretty much done. We can do any adjustments that we need to do, you know, simply just by drag selecting these edges, and we can add some more curvature here. We can, you know, we can now start iterating with this and say, well, is this back wider or thinner or whatever? You know, maybe we'll make it just a little wider like that. And I'm using scale because it operates on both sides of the center line. So let's throw this on a layer. How are we doing for time? 9:38, doing all right. Okay, so let's call this the chair seat. Let's take this and throw it here. And I'm just going to hide it for now. So let's talk about the base. Now, we don't know how big this base is, so I'm going to start just by giving myself a reference curve, and I'm going to just draw this a circle and say it needs to be this far, and then I'm going to go to perspective, and I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to rotate it 90. And this will give me a reference, a visual reference from the top view to know exactly how, you know, how big are we looking. What Mac am I running? I'm running a Mac that's probably older than the Mac that you're running, Damien. I'm running a 2014 MacBook Pro, but it does have the old Nvidia graphics, which is the reason I hold on to it, because I don't really like the AMD graphics, and the M1 stuff, we don't even know whether Rhino's going to run on it yet because we can't get hardware to test. So if you're looking for new Mac hardware, please, please, please hold off. Don't buy one with Intel Iris graphics. Don't buy the 13-inch MacBook Pro because it does not have standalone AMD graphics, and don't buy any of the Silicon M1 stuff because we don't even have hardware to test to see whether Rhino will run on it. It's been a huge architecture change. All our entire Mac dev team is scrambling right now trying to figure out whether or not Rhino's even going to run on the M1 stuff. So if you're going to buy a new Mac hardware, anything, make sure that you get one that has the secondary AMD card in it. If you get the Intel Iris or the Intel UHD graphic 13-inch MacBook Pro, Rhino's going to run terrible. We do not run well on the Intel stuff. I get more phone calls from people who bought 13-inch MacBook Pros and are upset on how badly Rhino runs. There's a forum post on Discourse on our forum about the Mac hardware. If you're looking for new Mac hardware, please look at the hardware section of our forum. It's titled, "If You're Buying a New Mac, Please Read This." All right, so let's talk about the base here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just go back to the SubD menu, and I'm going to just grab a primitive, and I'm going to draw my cylinder starting at 0, and I'm going to just figure out kind of where I'm at, and then I'm going to change my direction constraint to none. I'm going to pull it right up. Okay, and we end up with a SubD piece here. And you'll see that it kind of has this like Tylenol shape to it. I'm just going to shift, drag, select, grab all that and delete it. Get rid of the ends and open it up, which also gives me square tubing. The other thing you'll notice is it's got 3 intermediate sections in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull these out because I don't need them. And what this does is this changes it. So now I've only got 2 points, right? This is just like a curve that's got 2 points. And if I shift, drag, scale this, I can taper this thing nice and cleanly, okay, which is kind of what I want to do. I want to add just a little bit of taper to it. And actually, I need to double check this. I don't think I paid attention to this when I did it. I actually, because this has got 5 arms, I want 10 faces around this. So let's go back and do that correctly. I think this was only set to 8. Yep, it was. So let's do 10, and I'm going to just do 1 vertical face. And I'm going to put this at 0. And then let's pull that up. All right, so let's go back and do this again. Just delete that, which opens the end. That opens the end. Let's see, did it give me the right faces or did I screw something up? No, that's right. It gave me the right around faces, but I screwed up the verticals. It didn't take my input, so. Shift drag to add a little bit of taper. And then I'm going to shift command drag that, pull it up, and place it right about there. So that is the center of my array, right? And this is the distance of how far it's got to go. Now, the reason I did 10 faces is because I've got 5 arms, right? So I'm going to get rid of these intermediate faces. And what I can do is I'm going to grab one edge, and I'm just going to use the extrude icon. Let's do this in box mode. And I'm going to just pull this all the way out till it snaps near there. So I know I've pulled that out as far as it needs to go. And because this is a radial object and we don't have radial arrays yet or radial symmetry yet, I'm going to do something a little counterintuitive. I'm going to extract these 2 surfaces, delete the rest of this, and then I'm going to model my one part and then use a polar array, which does have history, to do my adjustments. So I know my arm needs to be about that long. I might need a few extra edges in here to do some detailing on the end, so let's do that. Let's add some edges. I'm just going to put one there, put another one there, because I've got 3, so that gives me the ability to be able to do that, right? So now I've got that shape. Now this transition is too small, is too fat, because 1, 2, 3, that's making up my curvature. So if I want to tighten this, I'm going to come up here and bevel it, and I'm going to add a couple more edges in that area, and then it tightens up. Starting to see how that works? All right, so let's take this and let's do a polar array. And I'm going to do this at 0. I want 5 arms, and that gives me my 5 arms. Now this is my parent object. So if I grab these faces and I move them down, all the other ones are going to adjust. Ooh, it didn't. Oh, because I didn't do it with history. Never mind. Let's do it right. I look dumb, so you don't have to. Let's turn history on and do it again. There we go. Now let's not look dumb. There we go. So now it adjusts. So now this gives me the opportunity to come in here and then say, okay, well, how does my array look? Do these pieces need to be fatter or skinnier? Does this need to be fatter out here? Does this need to be way fatter? Does that need to be like that? And then we can switch back and forth and kind of see what it looks like. So let's connect this stuff. And to do that, I'm going to Shift Command click these three edges on both objects, and I'm going to bridge it with one segment, but I'm not going to join it. And that seems counterintuitive, but I'll show you why. Because I'm going to take this and then do another polar array using the same settings. And that gets me the rest of my part, which I can then drag select and join. Want them to be smooth. And it broke the history, which is fine. And then if I switch to smooth mode, you can see I immediately get kind of what I was looking for. Okay. So I can look at this and say, well, I don't really like how this corner is happening. So that means I probably need to go back and make these edges smaller. So I'm actually going to undo this, and I'm going to make this guy smaller, and make this guy smaller, and make this guy smaller. See how history is helping me out here? So I'm going to make this the same width. And then I'm going to go back and do my bridge over. And see if I can get a little better result. And I may even need to bridge with two segments, so we'll take a peek at that and see. So it's only one segment. If I change this to two, and then I can mess with my straightness, that's going to help out a lot. So I'm going to add a little less straightness on there. I'm not going to join it. And then I'm going to do another polar array. Still have a little bit of a star shape. But we're better than they were. Okay. So if you wanted to mitigate that, we simply would just move these points closer together, or we could add an edge right down the center of this, and that would allow us to be able to adjust that as well. So let's add a little bit of thickness to this. I'm going to double click and select this entire edge, and then check this out. I'm just going to grab the extrude dot. I'm going to pull it over. I'm going to pull it one more time, and that gets me a beautifully smooth base in here. Now let's see what happens if we remove this edge. That starts to smoothen that up a little bit, doesn't it? So let's do that. See how that's cleaning up? The wonderful thing about SubD is it's incredibly durable. You can add stuff, take stuff away, you can play with it, do whatever you want, and the stuff is going to stay really nice and stable. See how that rounded up on us? That's kind of more of what we wanted. In fact, we may even want to play with these edges. Do we want to get rid of these edges? I don't like that. See how it pulled the highlight out? See that? I don't like that. So I'm going to leave those back in. But this edge is a little bit sharp, so I'm going to grab this and I'm going to slide it farther up. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. And then when I go back, see how nice and soft that is? Now check this out. Check out the surface quality on this stuff. Take that, Nurbs. Pretty gorgeous, huh? How do I add that thickness? I double-clicked an edge, this one, and I just used the extrude dot on the gumball, and we just extruded another face out. And in fact, that was a good question because I needed to do that again anyways. And then what I'm going to do is Shift Command click, double click, select all of those faces, and I'm going to extract those because I want to break those off of the model. And then I'm going to do a SubD offset to the inside. Let's do 0.5 units. Let's try that. I don't want it to be solid, and I do want to delete the input. Oops, got to go the other direction. Let's flip it. There we go. And that puts it in, right? So it offset everything. I'm going to take this and tuck it back up whence it came. And then check this out. Shift Command, double click. Nope, not that one. This one. Nope, not that one. This one. There we go. And then I'm going to bridge these two together. So think of bridge as like your blend tool, right? Remember blend surface and Nurbs? Bridge is like your blend surface. So if you've got two objects and you need to connect them, bridge is the thing that you're going to use to do that. Now, if I roll my mouse, if I click and roll my mouse, see how I can add or remove edges here? In this case, how many edges do we need to make a corner, folks? 3. I've already got 2, so that means I only need 1 additional. And it says 2, but stick with me. So let's go ahead and throw that on there. So these are now, oh, I didn't use the join. So let's join them, and I want it to be smooth. And it joins up, and you can see that immediately we get 1, 2, 3. So we've got our S curve, right? We've got 1, 2, 3 to make up the bottom of this, 1, 2, 3 to make the middle of it, and then 1, 2, 3 to make the top of it, just like we would if we did this in a Nurbs curve. If we want it tighter, what do? Move this down. If we want it softer, we move it up. So let's tighten this one just a little bit. Again, one of the goals as you're SubD modeling is going to be finding that nice balance between thick and thin, soft and sharp, right? And so if you can't get enough detail, see how this is starting to fold over on me? I don't want that. So that means maybe what I need to do is I need to grab this edge and maybe I need to bevel it. I need to add more detail here. So let's bevel that. Look at that. See how that sharpens up nicely? So now we're starting to get a really kind of a cast metal looking part, which is kind of what we wanted. Cool, right? All right, so let's call this based on, let's look at, see what it looks like with our chair, other than being horribly out of place. Let's put it like that. So let's talk about the casters. So let's throw this on a layer. By the way, I mentioned durability. I wasn't kidding. Let me show you something. Actually, we'll use the base because it's more suited. All right, so I did this in a demo with a customer. We were talking about SubD and they just about lost their mind when I did this. Let's make something like this. What are we doing on time? Yeah. We're a little behind, but that's okay. I think it's worth it. So let's do something like this. I just mirrored it and I joined it and I want it to be smooth. So I just made a new SubD thing here, right? This is all connected. Let's take this and apply a twist deformer to it. And I'm going to start the twist deformer here. And then we're going to finish it up here. And then I'm going to start twisting. Now, if I did a SubD twist, right, this would be kind of a reasonable SubD twist, right? Well, the way I did the demo is I did the twist because I had so much faith in how durable these things are that I went a little nutty. And poor Scott Davidson almost had a stroke when I did this. I started twisting as I was talking, and I said, well, see, you can just keep twisting and keep twisting and keep twisting. So like Twisting it once would make sense, you know, twisting it twice is getting a little crazy. Twisting it like 3 times is crazy. But as I was talking, I just kept doing this and kept going and kept going. And I felt like the tension in the room start to increase a little bit. And I just kept going and going and going and going and going and torturing this poor thing. And then I let it go. And it just went blink and it did it. And not only did it do that many twists, but check this out. It's still a valid SubD. I can still model on this thing. Not only that, but this thing, if I use the toNurbs command, it actually will create a Nurbs object out of this that is it's got its validity. Ah, that's interesting. This one actually has a naked edge where the other one didn't. Ah, okay. Let's see naked edges. What are the naked edges? It might have been because the thing was open to start with. Anyway, the point here is that not only is this stuff incredibly durable, because you see that it did it, but the quality of the surfaces is actually very good as well. And I'll have to investigate where that edge came. It might have been something that was open before I started the part, or it might be a bug that I have to go find. Anyway, you get the point. So let's back up a little bit. Let's just get rid of this stuff. So that's the durability of this stuff, is it's really, really kind of bulletproof. Now that I said that, I'm going to save because I haven't saved this model yet. They're like, oh yeah, you've got faith in this. No, I do. I just know how computers work. I'm worried about my Mac, not my Rhino. All right, so let's build this caster. And the caster is a Nurbs part. We want just to use a standard cylinder, right? Actually, I'm not going to use a cylinder. I'm going to use a tube. So I get my axle hole for free. And I'm going to just follow my part. No, not a truncated pyramid, silly. I want a tube. There we go. And I'm just going to follow my drawing over here and say, I think those wheels are just a hair small, so I'm going to pump them up a little bit and just get my axle in. And then go to top view and say, oh, it would be about that thick. So now I know this is a perfectly round part, right? So one thing about SubDs is they're not perfectly round. Even if you have 8 surfaces or 8 sections around, they're not perfectly round. So if you need something like wheels, I would use Nurbs. So let's do a blend edge here and here just to soften these. So we've got our wheel, right? So I'm going to rotate this around so that it lines up with my front leg. Like that. And then I'm going to straighten it out. There we go. And then I'm going to snap it to the center here. So I know I've got it placed correctly. It's actually kind of cool like that, but I'm going to drop it down under here. And then we'll talk about how to do the caster. So if we go to the front view, right view, we can see that we've got our axle here, and we may even want that to be out a little farther, right? Because it's a caster, so this is going to be our axle, and then we want to here. So as you roll, the caster goes in the right direction. And we know that that it has to kind of fit under here, and I may actually tuck this down just a little bit. And so I'm going to make the part from the top out of SubD. And there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can use what's called a paper doll technique, which is to lay something out flat and then just add some thickness and some shape to it. Or we can start with a cylinder and take parts out of it. I think I want to show paper doll just because we haven't shown that yet. So let's go to SubD, and I'm going to grab a single face, and I want this to have one subdivision in that direction and one subdivision in this direction. And then I'm just going to place it in the seam. And if I switch to box mode, you can see that that's just a very simple square, right? I can scale it, do whatever I want to it. So I know approximately what shape I want. So what I'm going to do is Shift Command click on an edge and just use the extrude dot to add a few more edges in here. And then I'm going to grab these edges and I'm going to pull them down. Let me put this in space, in the correct orientation in space, so I can see what's going on. And then I want kind of this point to kind of come forward like that. And maybe these two edges, both of these come forward like that. And then I'm going to pull these down a little bit, but I'm also going to move them forward. And so I've got this kind of caster shape, right? And if I switch to smooth mode, you can see that I'm kind of getting the shape that I want. And let's make this a little bigger. Let's make this a little bigger. Let's pull this forward just a little bit. So you can see how easy it is to lay this stuff out just like you would if you were sitting with a piece of paper and cutting out a shape. So I've got my basic shape for my caster, and let's place it kind of right up against there. And then I'm going to mirror it around the center line. We're almost done, by the way, so if you're close on time, we're getting close to being done. I'm going to mirror that over. And then I'm going to use bridge to put these edges, double clicking the center ones. I'm going to put it together, but I'm going to use straight. And I'm going to use 2 segments in there, that's fine. It just gives me 1 segment down the center, which is nice because I can do that for symmetry. And if I toggle that, oops, didn't join them. Let's join them. And if I toggle that, you can see that I get kind of a nice, like stamped steel kind of caster shape, right? Cool. Let's add a little thickness to this. SubD offset. In this direction, I am going to go out, and I think 0.05 is probably too much, so let's go 0.25. Oops, I did want that one solid. See, it's so nice of me to make all the mistakes and look dumb so you don't have to. There you go. And I want to get rid of this crease, so I'm just going to take the crease out, and then that makes it kind of a nice soft cast part with a sharp inside. And I'm actually kind of okay with that sharp. If I was going to do a really detailed rendering, I'd probably bevel this edge. But for this, we're probably okay. He says as he bevels it anyways. So there's our nice caster part. And then let's just add, because we want it to be perfectly round, let's add a Nurbs cylinder. And I'm going to just snap it to that vertex, pull it out about there, bring it up. And then you'll see something interesting. Watch this. If I, that's not it. You're like, that just looks like you screwed up. Yeah, I did. Now, this is what's interesting. Is to take this thing. I've got a Nurbs object here and a SubD object here. Check this out. If I Boolean it, boom, they Boolean, but the thing that you have to understand is this is no longer SubD. So if you're going to do this, make yourself a layer over here. I usually call it like SubD graveyard or SubD parts or something like that. Make a copy of this beforehand so that if you get down the road and you find that you need to make a modification to this lower part, that then you can do it. You know, it's easy to do. Let's add a Taurus on this because we can. That'll be our little landing pad that thing sits on, like that. And let's Boolean the whole thing back together. Let's bring that down, and then we will adjust all of this like that. Okay, so there's our caster. So let's just polar array this. There's our casters. And the last part we need to make is this little doodad up here. So let's take a look at that. I'm not going to bother making a little handle out here. That's just a simple Nurbs part. You guys can do that. So I'm going to take, and if I want to steal from a SubD, all I have to do is drag another set of edges out, and then I can grab this thing and explode it, and then I can steal a part off of it. It's kind of cool. It's almost like a plant, right? You can grow a little limb and then cut that off and then grow a new plant out of that limb. That gives me the ability to be able to pull this down, stick it in space, and I don't have enough. I can't change the shape of this because I only have 2 edges. So I'm going to add an edge. Of course, the add edge tool is in a different position on this machine than it is on my other machine. So I can find that and blend surface. Anytime you see me do a Nurbs demo on the Mac, I'm always like, where is blend surface? All right, so I'm going to place this kind of like that, and then I'm going to double click this. Check this out. Start dragging, hold down Shift, hold down Command, and it extrudes out an edge, just like we did before. And I'm going to do that twice just to get the thickness on that. So that's how I rolled that edge. So start dragging, hold down Shift, hold down Command, and then it extrudes an edge. And I'm breaking my rule here. I'm actually modeling in smooth mode, but it's a small enough adjustment that we can make it happen. So then what I can do later is once this gets converted to Nurbs, I can just Boolean these out, and I know these parts are going to fit perfectly. There's some ish in SubD because it's more of a sculptural process than it is a mechanical process. So as far as you can put numbers on it, you can dimension all of this stuff, but because of the sculptural nature of it, I tend to do any precision work in Nurbs versus trying to do the precision work in SubD. So I try to get my sculpt and my shape and my form in SubD, and then I add the precision later. If I Boolean this stuff, then I can put dimensions on it and know exactly what I'm dealing with. Okay, so let's add one more bit here, and we are about out of here. So I'm just going to make a cylinder like that. I don't need that edge, don't need that edge, so I'm going to delete them, and then I'm going to just take this guy, the center here. I'm going to move it out a little bit just to match my shape. I'm going to take the top of this, I'm going to pull it in just a little bit, just a bit. And I should probably do both of those at the same time so they match. That's why I love gumball modeling with SubD, is because you can do symmetrical modeling even though we don't necessarily have symmetry tools. I'm going to take this guy and stick it in here. And the same rules for SubD apply for Booleans. Rhino does not like coincident stuff. So if, say for instance, this point right here was exactly on this edge, Rhino's not going to be a huge fan of that. So let's take this and do a polar array. And I want, I don't know, 20 of these. That gives me that. I can grab this whole thing, and if life is treating me well, these should just Boolean nicely. If it's not, it'll crash, and then I can blame my 6-year-old or 7-year-old Mac. Hooray! So it did it. I can run the cap command to close that up. So now that's a closed Nurbs object. And then if I wanted to, I could just Boolean this out, but I'm not going to for this demo. We've covered that already. So essentially in an hour and 10 minutes with a lot of blabbering along the way, we've got a pretty nice SubD chair. This, I did a rendering demo on the PC side. This Mac, unfortunately, the graphics in it are really slow. So I think if I do a rendering demo, it's going to be a lot like watching paint dry. So If you want to see rendering stuff, because the rendering stuff in V6 and V7 is at parity across the board in Mac PC, check out the Windows video I did that just went up on YouTube yesterday. We can throw a few materials on here so that we can see what it looks like in rendered view, but I'm not going to try and throw it in ray trace because it'll take forever. No fault of Rhino, it's just the machine. This is a really old machine. So let's throw a metal base on here. You can see I start getting beach ball. The second I start putting rendering stuff on this machine, the beach balls come out. It does it eventually, but it's not nearly like the 32 core i9 with the RTX 5000 with 4,500 CUDA cores that I have on the side. This guy, I think, has like 25 CUDA cores or something like that. So let's do a different shade. I did kind of a blue yesterday. Let's do kind of a funky. Do some 60s office chair action here. Any questions while I do this? This is kind of the watch and paint dry section of the video. So I'm going to leave my reflectivity on this plastic high, but I'm going to drop the clarity so that it catches a lot of light, but the reflections are fuzzy. And then I'm going to grab all of my wheels. And this guy up here. Let's say assign to objects. And then I'm going to make a different metal. It's a little fuzzier. I'm going to drop the polish. We can try and throw a render on this. We'll see. We'll see how it works. And then let's make this just a little darker. So there's a difference between the two. There we go. Apply this to the casters. I don't know if you hear like all the fans on this machine just kicked on. Okay, so that's our basic chair. Let's go to, oh, what the heck? Let's give it a shot and see what happens if we throw it into rendered view. Let's do kind of a cool background color. Ooh, that's pretty nuclear, huh? And then I'm gonna, let's go to our ground plane. Ground plane. And I'm gonna use material. And I want this to be a plastic. And I want the color to be the same as the background. And let's light it. We can try and see what it looks like just with a regular light source. And if it looks stinky, we can throw a panel light in there. Oh, poor machine. This poor thing is just not set up for. Ah, look at that. It lives. my RTX card would have 200 samples done already. So there we go. We proved that it actually does render on this machine, which is 6 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. It's just not going to do it quickly. All right. So that's kind of where we're at for that. Questions. Quick question about GPU. Will Rhino work with Nvidia cards on Imax from 2012? The main thing on Imax that old is, can it run at least the minimum operating system for V7, which off the top of my head, I want to say is 14.6. Double check the website, the system requirements on the Mac side, and they'll tell you. As long as it meets the minimum requirements, we can go from there. It should work. I have an Nvidia GTX in this car, in this machine, and it actually works quite well as far as, you know, modeling performance, but it just doesn't have enough CUDA cores because the rendering stuff in Rhino for V7 and V6 is all GPU enabled. So the difference in speed in rendering on the modern Rhino stuff is all GPU. So if you're looking for new hardware, first of all, for the love of God, please stay away from the Intel only. The Intel HD, Intel Iris Max, stay as far away from them as you possibly can because Rhino does not run well. If you get one that has the Radeon stuff, get the biggest, hottest, fastest Radeon you can get with as many rendering cores as you can get, because the rendering cores is what makes the rendering stuff go fast. Okay, just as a comparison, at 2 minutes and 11 seconds, the rendering on my RTX 5000 machine would have been done like 1 minute and 40 seconds ago. We did a rendering yesterday, and I threw the Nvidia denoisers on it, and it was like a 9-second render. I got this one on my Mac Pro Radeon RX 5000, 8 GB. That actually probably would run well. How's the performance on it? I would imagine it would probably render pretty well on that with 8 gigs of video RAM. How many rendering cores does that thing have? Super fast. How many rendering cores does that thing have? Probably a couple thousand. Yeah. If you look at the specs when you're looking at GPUs, you want to look at VRAM. You want at least 4 gigs, if not more, and you want to look at CUDA cores or rendering cores. I guess they're not CUDA cores on the AMD stuff, but whatever their core, whatever their rendering core is, as many of them as you can get, that's what you want. All right, hour and 17 minutes. That's not bad, and we're another hour and a half, and we'll have a rendering. No, it's not going to take that long. But anyway, you can see what's going on here. Anything CUDA is an Nvidia thing, and Nvidia is not on the Mac, so you'll have to look at whatever the equivalent of CUDA is on the AMD stuff. Whatever the rendering core is on AMD, that's what the Mac stuff uses. I don't know whether it's OpenCL or Optics or whatever. I can't remember what they call it. I think Optics is an Nvidia thing too. But if you have any questions, double check the forum. There's a bunch of hardware stuff on the Mac, but stay away from the M1 silicone stuff right now because we don't know whether it's going to work yet. The second we find out whether it's going to work or not, we'll let you know. And but in the meantime, we don't want people spending money on stuff and then not being able to run. Thank you, appreciate it. Any other questions before we go? If not, I'll let you go. Otherwise, we'll just sit here together and I'll drink coffee and we'll watch a rendering go, which is, my idea of a good afternoon, but might not be yours. Cool. Well, I hope you're as excited about V7 as I am. The soft release is now. You can buy it today if you go to rhino3d.com/buy. The hard release is going to be coming up shortly, but it's ready to go right now if you wanna grab it and give it a roll. We do these about once a month. They're all going to be V7 from now on. So if you like this one, come back next month. You'll see more of this. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. Be safe, everybody out there in this crazy world. Stay inside and learn SubDs and go make great stuff. My name's Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Mac V7. Woohoo! Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.